Hello, everybody. This is Steve, and I am joined by Doug, and we are your representatives from the PATC or Plastic Adventures Toy Community. And welcome to another episode of the Sandbox. This is our catch-all. It's not news, it's not show and tell. It's just the ever so enlightened opinions of a couple of old guys who uh, like to put children's toys on shelves. So, anyways, welcome. In today's discussion, we are going to be examining how franchises have changed or stayed the same over the last 40 years. The ones that have figured out how to have that magic and continue on through the different decades, touching people's lives of different generations, and have shown the staying power
Mhm.
to kind of hang with us. And there's reasons for it. And then there's some not so good reasons. So why don't we go ahead and get started there, Doug? Did you have one you wanted to get this thing popping with?
Yeah, I know we've kind of in a lot of our other segments, we've talked about some of these individualized ones over a while, but we've never really actually tackled this topic, head on specifically for this reason. So, um, we talk always about the big franchises that we grew up with, right? We talk about Transformers, we talk about GI Joe, Masters of the Universe. Star Wars doesn't really count because Star Wars was kind of it's its own thing, right? Uh, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are kind of in there. They kind of float on the coattails of all those things, and then a lot of the other ones. So, but the reason why those ones are the big four are because they have changed with each generation or with each iteration. They have slightly altered what it is that they think that people will find intriguing about them. So,
Yeah, they've all got some core elements that are very appealing,
mhm.
but the presentation has changed a little bit over the years to try and capture different audiences.
Yeah. I thought we'd bring up one of the lower ones first, or ones that I consider on lower on the list, but one that has actually changed the most over the years. So let's talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles first, because
Yeah,
I think that that's a good one that really kind of illustrates and shows how things change from each generation to the next, right?
yeah, and that's interesting. It really so Turtles, you had the comics that
Mhm.
comic book people knew about. And that came right out of about the mid 80s when you started seeing a lot of the darker superheroes, V for Vendetta, The Watchmen,
Watchmen.
different takes. And Ninja Turtles was like this sort of parody of Daredevil, Frank Miller's Daredevil, and some of those darker elements. So as kids, we never really got to know Ninja Turtles that way. We got the really kind of like fun-loving, goofy cartoon turtles,
Yeah.
which was just instant, gigantic, mega success.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
instantly. I mean, they knew what it was. They knew who their target audience was, and they knew how to get them interested.
and they slayed.
They did.
I mean, they just came in and they just absolutely wrecked house. Ninja Turtles took everyone over.
They did.
It beat GI Joe and Transformers and Masters of the Universe, which was on its way out anyways. But
But
I mean,
let's talk. Let's talk about. Because those two right there. Those were the toy blockbusters in the boy toy aisle, right? Transformers and GI Joe. There was no bigger than.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so to have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles practically come out of nowhere in the late '80s, right? '88, and kind of take over the entire toy aisle.
it did, and it dominated for 2 years. And everybody was used to their fun-loving turtles and everything. And then the movie comes, and it got like dark and serious.
It did.
So I mean, there was like this. The cartoons didn't necessarily have to follow the movie. I mean, we got a lot of seasons of the cartoon, but this reinvented Turtles. I hate the word reinvented, but it really was a mature and darker take. But it went just as good with kids as it did with adults. So just right there within that 2 year span, they did the thing that Transformers and GI Joe couldn't. Uh, they had a
Exactly.
mega successful movie with the franchise,
Yep.
which also achieved great cult status. And in some cases, people who put their turtles down after the first year or second year, it re-engaged those fans and made people want to buy the toys again. It made the
Yep.
kids into it again. But they maintained the one consistent thing: four different turtles, four different identifiable personalities,
Hmm.
and a family element. So it keeps that, and that's this thing that keeps going out like version after version. And in my opinion, that's one of the things that keeps Turtles as one of those like evergreen franchises. It's always going to be there because of that appeal, no matter how bad some of the later changes might have gotten.
Well, and that that's one of the points of the discussion is that we're looking at the changes that have happened to this particular franchise over the years, and so you touched on the fun-loving, very colorful aspect of the original toy release, and how different it was to their big screen debut, right? Very different turtles, but there were still elements that fans of the original of the toy turtles or the cartoon turtles would still recognize.
Oh yeah.
And so that's why they did change that. They changed their shell basically, but they were still the same.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean that movie set Turtles up for another couple of years at least after that.
Well, and then you talk about the downside of it, like, and that's the point of the generational thing I'm trying to make is that we'll have these really good generations of these stories, and then somehow or another they're gonna get flipped on their head a little bit, and a lot of the fans go, "Why? Wait, why did you do this? Why did we do this?" And then so you'll get a generation in there that's kind of like, "Oh, well, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and 3. I mean, we
Yeah.
got to talk about them because they're there, but they're not masterpieces. They're not things that people really love."
No, they're pretty dreadful. And I mean, that's what happens when you get like 14 executive producers in a room together and each one of them wants something out of it.
Yeah.
And the one thing that reignited the passion for Turtles in the movie, they decided to go just right back to I mean, they were very cartoonish, the
Mm-hmm.
second and the third movies. Really
Which I think was
silly.
a bad move. To me personally, that was a bad move. They
I
should have
think so
stuck
too.
with the theme and how they had it in the first movie. I think those 2 and 3 would have been, even the silliness aspect of time travel, if they would have stuck to the gritty, darker versions of the Turtles, those movies would have been a better success.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that worked really good about the first one is it actually had like consequence and
Mm-hmm.
peril. And in those next couple of movies that came out, it was just really, really lighthearted. So it sort of went the cartoon route, and you could get that same kind of stuff out of the cartoons, which were on every single day. So Turtles, starts its eventual fade like any other toy franchise does. And then we wind up with
But then it comes
Tur
back,
what is
right?
it, Turtles the next generation with the
Oh no,
puppets from Saban?
no. I mean, so we still got a couple of iterations to go in here. So, Turtles, Teenage Ninja Turtles 3, kind of let us down. And then you're right, the Teenage Ninja Turtles, the next mutation,
That's what it was.
the live action TV version let us down even further. I mean, it was like, hey, let's mash this Power Ranger idea that everybody loves, and let's see if we can bring the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles into it. And that did not work, even though there was a crossover between the Power Rangers and these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah,
It
it's
still
like
wasn't good.
all they did was just throw the same formula back at it. They're like, oh, well, the last two movies didn't work. Let's do something kind of like the last two movies.
Yeah,
Oh, but on TV. There
but
you
on
go. That'll
TV.
get them.
Well, but then right after this, in 2002, late 2002, they announced that they were going to be releasing another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle cartoon, and I think at this point, people were just like, "Ugh, I'm TMNT'd out, right? We don't want another TMNT." And then TMNT 2003 was released, and that now this is what I'm talking about, these generational things. 2003 reinvigorated the the
Yeah,
the TMNT fan base.
yeah. It got more serious. It kept some of the comedy aspects, but what they did is they did not go back to square one formula, which was the cartoony kind
Mhm.
of slapstick thing. They decided to really, that was a really good time for a lot of like Masters of the Universe, the
Mhm.
2000X series, because it did get serious and kept some of the other elements, but they both were hitting on the right kind of a thing to re-engage people.
Yep.
And I hadn't bought a Ninja Turtle figure since like the late 80s, and I bought those four turtles from that
Yeah, when those guys came
2002
out, I mean,
series.
everybody was interested in it,
They
right?
were terrific. They are awesome figures.
Yep.
They're on my shelf to this day. They're great figures. Um,
And then that was a pretty long running series.
yeah, and then we got another movie though.
We did.
Yeah, TMNT, which was a very grown-up movie with very
Well,
little slapstick and humor.
and it was one that the people who made that movie took the redesign of Turtles to heart. They were like, we want this to be something that looks different from previous Turtles, but captures the soul and the elements of the Turtles. And it really did. And so that was another generational hop
Yeah,
that really did something for the franchise.
and again, all centered around family,
Mm-hmm.
all centered around sort of circumventing dysfunction,
Right.
working around each other's problems, uh, overcoming that sort of inner family turmoil.
Yeah.
And TMNT did not do well critically, but damn if that wasn't a great Ninja Turtles movie. I mean, it was awesome.
It was a great Ninja Turtle movie. And it was one that I think kind of uh, uh, allowed the newer aspect of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the newer fans and the older fans, to kind of meet in the middle and kind of share this love for Teenage Mutant Ninja for their franchise, which is something that is sorely missing in today's franchises. And we'll get to that when we talk about the other ones. Because the very next generation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, was 2012, right? The CGI one, which was on Nickelodeon, and
Uh,
I
when did the
liked
Bay
that one.
movies hit?
Huh?
When did the Michael Bay movies hit?
Did they hit before that? I
I,
can't
I
remember.
want to say
I
that
was
they
gonna
were
say
like
I can't remember if they hit before or after that. No, it was after
2009.
that. It was 2014.
I think it was just a couple years after Transformers because that was a box office success, and Michael Bay headed up these turtles. It was right around the same time.
Was it the same time? Okay.
Yeah,
I, I,
and
I wasn't sure if that one was before or after, so that's why
yeah,
I didn't.
that's okay because Turtles has been really good about course correcting.
Yeah.
Uh, and they didn't really need to until those Michael Bay movies came. And why do you think that didn't stick with people?
Because Michael Bay
Oh,
doesn't necessarily understand the real characters behind what makes them popular, the real characteristics about what might made these characters popular in the first place.
exactly. They had caricatures. They were all like amped up caricatures of what the characters were, but oh, it was just an awful movie with toys slamming together.
Yeah.
And that's why they lost it. Nobody talks about Ninja Turtle movies, those Ninja Turtle movies, unless they're like, "Oh, I remember that. There was this one time when they were, jumping around in the snow or whatever." You don't remember what you love about you don't love it.
But
You
we
just
do
remember
talk
that it
about
happened.
the Nickelodeon version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which actually was really well. Again, they a new design of turtles, but they kept everything that was essential to the story and the characters intact.
Yeah. And that's why the toys sold and the kids
Mm-hmm.
are playing with the toys still.
Yep.
Um,
But then what was the last one that came out? Now we got to talk about the last one, the rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
oh, yes, yes, yes.
And I think that's probably the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle generation I've seen that literally split a fandom for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because there were people who were like, God, yes, I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then other people like, oh, you're like the Rise? You're a shitty person for liking Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Not a real TMNT fan would like that. I
Well, you know what? A lot of people feel differently about Star Wars, so
oh yeah.
just be
But
happy that you're getting it. That's
well,
all I can
but
say.
that's what I'm saying. I was like, So we're at this point in for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where this last iteration um, was one that was not universally accepted by all of the fans. It was not well well done according to older fans, but well done enough for newer fans.
Yeah,
So
I can't tell. I mean, is this a popular one with the kids? The character designs turned me off. I wasn't really interested in seeing it. I don't like that that style that's sort of Johnny Bravo.
yeah,
I like it for Johnny Bravo, and I like it for Powerpuff Girls and Samurai Jack, but I don't like it for Star Wars. I don't like it
yeah.
for Ninja Turtles. I definitely uh I was on the fence with Transformers animated because it was a terrific story, but the animation style was really weird.
It was hard to get
Uh,
behind.
so for
Yeah,
me,
but
I just I
for me, what I saw for Rise was I felt like the writers took too big of a departure from what it was that made Turtles universally accepted and universally loved by everybody. I think they changed the characters a little too much in that one, and it was too much that it drove people away from it.
yeah, well, they'll course correct.
They
And
will.
you got Seth Rogen heading up a new Turtles movie.
Fart jokes.
And Dix too, don't forget that.
Yeah. But
Uh, we'll
uh, but
we'll see.
we'll see exactly. We'll see.
Um,
But
because
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was one I wanted to start with because I think it really kind of illustrated and lays the foundation for how I think we should talk about the other franchises.
yeah. Yeah, so what do you want to hop to next? Do you want to do like GI Joe?
Yeah, GI Joe has had a couple of iterations as well, and one that has kind of vastly changed from what it initially started out as. And I'm not talking about the 60s GI Joe, right? I'm talking about the 1982 A Real American Hero was when you and I came into it, to what it is now and the many generations in between. So with A Real American Hero, when that came out, that was something that was incredibly new, right? The idea that you had this highly specialized team of individuals who were very good at the job that they did, and that's why they were GI Joe, right? Uh, they weren't just one guy who was highly specialized in everything and was like a James Bond type of character. No, this was now a team. This was a crack commando team that was very good
Mhm.
at what it did.
Yep. And there were a lot of different personality types that I think different people got to dig into. I thought that it represented women incredibly well
Yep,
in that show.
I
And
agree.
it's a diverse team too. It was one of those first things where um, it wasn't just like, some cartoon with like one black person or one Asian person in it. Like this whole blended team, you had people from just across the spectrum of different creeds and races and everything that really came together. And I thought it really presented that well. So
I think
I
so
think
too.
one of the engaging points of that was when you're, and I obviously cannot speak for this, but I would think that if you're a child who's a person of color back then, and you see Alpine or Stalker or Roadblock looking badass, you feel good about seeing that.
Yeah,
It wasn't just like eight white guys with blonde hair and blue eyes. I mean, it was very appealing to a lot of people, and
yep.
even little girls seeing something in there that was really really cool. That I love GI Joe for that, and as
I
much
mean,
as I love Transformers, it's not like there's like a Hispanic robot. They're not, they're all different colors. They may have different voices, but
right.
GI Joe is people, and I just love it to death because it was just so accessible from so many points. And you had A
Well,
Real American Hero that goes, you get, what do we get, like 21 episodes of season one.
mhm,
Season two like gets 48.
yeah,
So it's a big run on season two. You had GI Joe the movie, which was in development after season one. So um, it didn't really keep up with some of the season two things with characters, but it's okay because when it was being written and going to be put out. we really didn't have a change in GI Joe until it went to Deke.
Right.
And even then, they tried to retain a lot of the same elements. A lot of the same things that made it good were still good. The animation was horrible. I mean, you had some things like the anti-drug and the anti pollution type stuff that was
Yeah.
happening. But what did that go from about like when was that first? When was the first A Real American Hero? 1983 when those cartoons
Yeah, I
hit.
think it was like either late '82 or early '83, and those guys and a real American Hero, which changed into um, International Hero or GI Joe, the International Hero, something like that. Um, that iteration, with all of those in between, kind of ran until about like 1994, I think, right?
Yeah, and they were pretty solid. I mean, that was a really, really good run for a franchise that didn't change much.
Yeah,
They only went to Deke because Sunbow was more expensive.
right.
You know, the toy line was in its starting to be in its later years after GI Joe the movie, and they were thinking, well, okay, we got to scale back expenses and blah blah blah. And then you had like 250 more figures released because it
Yeah,
was still selling.
yep,
So I
yeah,
think it way outperformed, even though the cartoons weren't as good as the original, but they did the same thing. So GI Joe probably win. No, that's a lie. Power Rangers has outpaced Joe, but for
yeah,
the ones that I care about, GI Joe had the biggest block of being a successful toy with like no interruption from 82 until like 94.
yeah,
And then it petered out and they were done with it. Um,
yeah. And then it just GI Joe kind of just went away for a little while. It wasn't on the shelves. If it was on the shelves, it was on the shelves because it was old stock, um, and it just wasn't selling very well. But then we'd moved on to later generations of GI Joe, and I unfortunately this was when I had to become a grown up, and I joined the Navy, and I went around the world, and got married and had 4 kids, and I did not stay on top of things like I probably wanted to or should have. But I know in that time, there were a few more iterations of GI Joe. I think in that time we had, um, what did we have? We had Sigma Six somewhere in there.
well, you're missing a couple
Well,
of
that's what
really
I'm saying.
important ones.
I know I'm missing
So
some.
you'll know this as soon as I mention it. GI Joe Extreme.
Okay.
I want to say that thing had like a 12 episode run. And what did they do with GI Joe Extreme? They went to like 5 points of articulation, hyper muscled. They copied the other action figures that were on the market. They thought that by going extra detail and these gigantic accessories and stupid shit, that they would sell just as well as the other toys. But what GI Joe Extreme forgot was everything good in the previous 12 years of Joe.
Yeah.
So you didn't have memorable characters. You still had some representation in the show, but um, the toys were not fun to play with anymore. They were in these weird static poses that
Mm.
you couldn't even get them like effectively into vehicles. They were more expensive because they were bigger. So GI Joe Extreme died an incredibly quick death. I want to say it was like one run of figures, horrible figures,
Mhm.
and it was gone. And then you went to um, they went back to O-ring style, but a little bit bigger.
Those are the ones with the
Foreign.
big shoulders and
They, they
the
went
big
they went
grippy
from
hands.
Extreme to Sergeant Savage,
Okay.
and Sergeant Savage was sort of like this World War II era GI Joe. And again, you went back to period specific. You didn't have as much of the good sci-fi with it. And I just don't think that they were thinking in terms of identifiable characters with that because it was just like this band of like World War II era guys like Sergeant Rock.
Okay.
And they had a couple of vehicles and I don't know that there was maybe like a pilot episode produced. I can't recall because at that time I was done with Joe.
Well, I
Um,
know that Savage had VCR tapes that would come with
yeah.
some of the characters, but I don't know if that was enough to get kids hooked on buying them.
No, it completely lost the thing that made it great. And we skip GI Joe Goes to Sleep for 5 or 6 years, whatever it was. Um, and then you had Sigma Six,
Mhm. Now,
and then there
Sigma
was this.
Six is the first GI Joe I remember as an adult, where kids were excited about. Kids were excited about GI Joe again with Sigma 6.
Yeah. So after Sergeant Savage dies, a year or two later, Toys R Us starts reissuing original O-Ring Joe,
Oh, right, yeah.
just as an exclusive line, and I bought everything. And some of them were really awful repaints, and some of them were really cool. They reused parts because of Hasbro lost a whole shipping container of assets
Right.
and molds, and some of the molds were too disintegrated, so some of the stuff they showed they never delivered. But
I do know
so
that
that
they did release some good army building packages though in those days.
yeah, like
Green shirt, blue shirts.
we needed. So that was keeping the Joe heartbeat alive, and nobody was happier than me to see those. I bought everything.
Mhm.
And then I want to say it was what, like 2000 or 2001 when we got the first uh, cartoon appearance back, which was Sigma 6. And they made these giant, like 8-inch figures or something for
They
that with
did.
clip-on accessories. And it was really like hyper anime styled, but that hung for like a couple of seasons and
It
that
did.
stuck with kids.
Well, and it wasn't just the bigger size figure. Sigma 6 also released a smaller size Joe versions alongside their big ones. So not only did you have these big, large figures, but you also had these little small 2-inch figures that went in with smaller
Oh,
vehicles.
that's right. I remember that. Yeah.
So they had like this concurrent wave going with these two things,
Yeah.
which really hit big, right?
And
That
and
was it.
you also had a bunch of 12-inch Joe reissues and new Joes and stuff, and that was kind of living on the shelf. So Sigma 6 did manage to re-engage with kids
Yeah.
and get them involved in the show.
Well, and I think that's the one that kind of changed how GI Joe went going forward. And what I mean by that is GI Joe is no longer a big team of 40 to 50, specialized characters. GI Joe is now a team of like 6 people.
Yeah.
And it's the core group of 6 people that have kind of gone forward in all of the other movies, right? Well, the things that led up to the movies. Of course you get Duke, of course you get Snake Eyes. Yeah, you get Scarlet, who's been renamed now to Agent Scarlet a few times, and then back to Scarlet, and
Copyright.
stuff. And you have Roadblock, right? Who's worked his way up from back in the day, he was a second tier character to me, and now in this new wave of Joe, he's like top tier. He's tier 1 now with leading GI Joes when Duke is not around, and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really loved Roadblock in the Real American Hero appearance.
Mhm.
That he's this chef, but he's so yoked, right? He's this
Right,
big badass guy. Um, but you're right. We now like scale down to this core set of characters that we get every time.
right,
And because of Sigma 6, we get 25th anniversary Joe
mhm.
and all of that good stuff that came along with it. Um, and then we get GI Joe from Paramount.
And yeah, and this is what I mean by the changes that happen generationally for the franchise. And so we get news that GI Joe is coming to the big screen, and everybody's happy about that, right? Oh yeah, this is going to be great. GI Joe's coming back to the big screen. This is wonderful. And it does not do it does not do well in the eyes of GI Joe fans.
No. Again, they took the secret sauce and they diluted it too much.
They did. Now,
I
what
do
we
under
did get from that was a really good line of action figures. We got some modern GI Joe action figures that came out with lots of different molds and lots of different ideas, and it did a lot to reinvigorate the toy collecting version of GI Joe, but not so much the character and story drive from what was GI Joe.
Yeah, and I mean, oh, and sometime in that, okay, so we got the movies. I get where they tried to go, but when you put GI Joe all in the same suit, when you
Yeah,
put it and they all look the same, you're
yeah,
losing what kind of made Joe cool was that they
individuals.
were you were yeah, each they were special at something that they did, and those uniforms had to do with some sort of
whatever
function
it
that
was
they
they did.
performed, right? So now you went X-Men and Power Ranger style and you dressed them all up in these stupid black suits and you did not give them character moments and time to shine. Um,
They messed up the relationships between with Duke and the Baroness, and Ripcord now became an important character, which he was never an important character before in any of the other iterations. And I'm not saying just because they changed his race, they changed everything about that was the character. That had nothing to do with it. It was just an all around, just a really kind of a bad idea for what they did with
yeah,
that first
they
movie.
just they tried to X-Men it, Fox's X-Men, which worked great for X-Men.
Hmm.
The X-Men all wear blue and yellow spandex together, right?
Right.
They all look different and they've got mutant powers. The only mutant power that this movie had was that it seemed to make people not want to come back and watch it.
Yeah,
Because it's like horribly unwatchable.
it
You
is.
cannot pop that in and enjoy that movie.
There
And
are there are like fleeting, very fleeting one or two scenes that are rewatchable, but for the most part, the rest of that movie is just completely forgettable and not even worth watching. And you go, well, then they came out with the second one. Well, they didn't double down like on the first. No, they went another direction that was still not as great.
yeah, I mean they only marginally course corrected.
Hmm.
They gave us some cool stuff and some new characters, but uh, overall the same problem was there. There was no characters.
Yep.
It wasn't deep enough. It didn't have uh, appealing enough personalities for people to want to engage with.
Yeah.
Nobody cared that Duke died in that movie. Who
Dude, and
cares?
he died so fast and so oddly that it was like, wait, is Duke dead? Duke died? Duke is dead?
Yeah.
We don't care? Oh, all right, we're moving on.
I mean, that was supposed to be your center from the first movie. That would be like killing off Wolverine in X-Men 2.
Yeah,
But they didn't make you care about him like they did Wolverine. So they missed it. They tried to fix a few things, but they didn't do enough.
yeah,
And again, this is a bunch of like out of touch producers all sitting around a table deciding what the people want to see. When when you look back at the franchise, you know what we want to see because all the successful ones have what we want to see. So,
exactly. Well,
God help me.
but in between the weirdness that was GI Joe, the two movies, we did get some pretty good toy iterations out of it, and another good story. So we did get GI Joe Resolute, which was a great GI Joe story.
Yeah, that was a terrific love letter to
It
GI
was a
Joe.
great story. And then we got the Pursuit of Cobra action figures,
Uh-huh.
which were another highlight for the toy collecting community. I mean, those action figures are still highly sought after today. So
Yeah.
there were some gems that came in the middle of that, but the movies kind of were a big letdown, a very big letdown for the
Yeah,
franchise.
and we got Renegades, but that got time slotted to death, just
It
like
did.
2000X He-Man. And Renegades actually, if you're willing to divert from the Joe that you know,
Hmm.
it was an awesome kind of like A-team
Yeah, I actually enjoyed it.
fun story.
I have both of the seasons on DVD, so I'm
Yeah, the animation looked a little too Beavis and Butthead to me, but
once you got past that, the story was good.
yeah, the story was good enough. It made you want to watch. So
Yep.
Renegades got it right. It was bad time slot. I don't know if Hasbro was in between things and just wanted to kill it or what, but they did a good job of getting rid of it.
Yeah, and GI Joe is one of the reason why it's an evergreen franchise is because it does do this right. With every stinker, we get something that kind of revitalizes it, and then
Yeah,
it stays around for a while, and then it starts to stink again, and then
yeah.
comes right back. So uh, it's it's evergreen for a reason, though. So
The core fans keep it alive, and that's
yeah.
why we get O-ring Joes, and that's why we get classified. I have a suspicion that if it ever hits big media again, I mean, Snake Eyes got it wrong again. I mean,
Oh gosh, that movie.
if they can figure out how to course correct and give us like a TV special or an animation or something, and they put back the things that get people into it, then it will succeed again. And it's alive and well for collectors, but it's not like Ninja Turtles, which gets like an A minus.
Mhm.
GI Joe is probably like a B minus,
Yeah.
something like that, for as far as how it's been able to hang on and
Yeah.
re-engage fans, which still isn't too bad.
No.
Uh,
And you and I both have ideas on how we can revitalize some of these franchises, which will be the topic of a future discussion we're going to have, maybe our next one. Uh, but right now we're running out of time on this segment, so we're going to take a quick break, go to our non-sponsor commercial, and we will come right back to it.
Watch out, America. You never know where Zap It'll pop up next.
Hello,
Bobby! Zap it!
the mailman.
Zap it! The color disappears, but the fun never ends.
Dad.
Hey, Bobby!
Ah!
Zap it! Complete with guns and disappearing liquid. Additional refills in red or blue sold separately. Zap it! The color disappears, but the fun never ends.
Goodbye, Tish.
It's finished! I've created a monster lab, and it's too gross. First, you put monster flesh on their creepy little bones. Then pour flesh remover into the monster lab and bubble off their flab. Too yucky.
Look at this nasty guy.
The Monster Lab. Watch for time freaks and more gross creations so you too can be a mad scientist. Too gross.
all right, welcome everybody back to the Sandbox. This is somewhat of a jumbo-sized episode where we have been discussing the various changes in some of the biggest franchises out there. In the last segment, we covered only Ninja Turtles and GI Joe because apparently we have a lot to talk about. But you want to talk about franchises that change or transform. This may be a single segment in and of itself because we're going to be talking about Transformers this time. Another one of those big evergreen franchises that just, it may peak, it may valley a little bit, but it doesn't valley for very long. So Transformers, I want to say that More Than Meets the Eye, the original miniseries, was, I think it was 84 when that hit, because I think the toys were 83. And I do
And
remember.
we're talking just Transformer toys. We're not talking Diaclone Japanese toys.
Yeah, we're talking as we know it as Transformers. All those lucky ducks across the pond over there got to have all these toys before we did.
Yep.
But we probably didn't know that we needed them until Transformers came along. This is just, it was one of those things, when you had the deregulation of cartoons and they could now be based on toy lines, Transformers came right after Masters of the Universe and GI Joe, or right around the same time as Joe. And I mean, it took the world by storm. Hasbro could not have ever imagined that they would have two franchises that were fighting against each other for toy shelf supremacy, like Transformer and Joe, and how we intermingled, man. We bought them both.
Yeah, there was no difference between the two as far as kids were concerned. They were equally as cool.
Yeah, we loved them for differently the same reasons.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And for many of the same reasons, the reason Transformers struck with kids is the same reasons why GI Joe is so popular, right? It had a diverse cast, very different personalities between each of the different characters. Your good guys and your bad guys were very clearly defined. And it was easy to get sucked into this world as a little kid to be able to pretend Megatron versus Optimus Prime. I mean, it wasn't a difficult concept for kids.
Yep. And even though GoBots beat Transformers to the market, Transformers was superior in virtually every aspect of its storytelling and character development. I do love GoBots figures, by the way, as just standalone toys. They're rad. And in a lot of cases better than some Transformers. But Transformers was our first real broad, big taste of like big robot type cartoons. And it wasn't big robot like somebody piloted the robot.
Nope.
It was Big Robot, like these were living characters and beings. So I think that people engaged with these characters a little bit differently on different levels, because it wasn't Gundam redubbed.
Right.
It wasn't Diamos or anything that we got pulled over here and repackaged.
They
It
weren't
wasn't
mech
even,
suits, right? They weren't giant mech
yeah,
suits that a
yeah.
guy
Or
would pilot.
it wasn't even Voltron, which was great for having different character types in that show too. These robots were the characters, and the voice actors did such a terrific job of defining the characters, how they sounded, and they all had their specialties, like GI Joe.
Mhm.
And it had a very, very accessible human point of view. So that was a good break-in point with Spike and Bumblebee,
Mhm.
being able to kind of see it through their views of some of the things that were happening. It was just very unique. So, this thing explodes. And I mean, it gives us colorful toys. And I mean, the toys weren't just action figures. They transformed. They
Yeah, they
became
did
cars
something,
and trucks.
right?
Yeah.
And what you got as a kid was something that I mean, I don't know. I took a transformer usually with me everywhere I could go. We talked about this before about reason why some of the things are so popular with us, certain characters specifically. Anything that I could fit in my pocket and take to school with me was a plus. So
Uh-huh.
GI Joes, GoBots, Transformers, they all had some kind of pocket-sized quality to them
Yeah.
that just gave them that little bit of extra, really cool tip to it as a kid, right? So I mean, you get things like, Soundwave may have been too big to carry to school, but you could stick Buzzsaw in your pocket.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
You could do that, and I did on many occasions. In fact, I think my favorite toy, my favorite transforming of all time, was the Chronoform Takara robot transforming watch,
Yeah.
because it could go with me everywhere I went, right?
Yep.
And
I
so,
remember.
but what Transformer brought to us was it brought a lot of different aspects of of objects that were everyday objects, cars, cameras, guns. Um, they went from one thing to another, and that another thing as a child was it struck a chord, right? Something very cool, something that could change. So it had all the hallmarks of an instant success for a kid. Great comic, great cartoon, great toy. It was a slam dunk, home run, whatever you want to call it. It had it in spades.
It did. Yeah, it had broad appeal. And, like it had some real emotional storylines too. The girl who fell in love with Power Glide and different things that really humanized the characters really well. And you had Transformers going really strong. So by the time you got outside of season 1 and all of the groundwork laid for season 2 and the animation starting, and then they start simultaneously working on Transformers the movie. So you get, again, just like GI Joe, I want to say it's 21 episodes for season 1 and then another 48 for season 2 for Transformers. But they made a little bit of a boo-boo. And it actually worked out for GI Joe very well to not make that same boo-boo. They decided that, we're a few years into it. We want to stay on top of this thing and keep everything fresh. So we got to get rid of all the old toys and come up with new toys to sell. And they just didn't realize how invested in the characters that people were. So you eliminated 95% of the original characters that people were in love with. And no matter how cool, and I mean, dude, Springer is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how cool RC is, and how accessible that Rodimus Prime should be because of his struggles with taking on leadership, and no matter how good of a role model Ultra Magnus was, the kids just got all of the last like 3 years of their hopes, dreams, and loves smashed in a movie and gotten rid of. No matter how good the movie is and how
There
much
were
we love it.
kids crying in the movie theater because Optimus Prime had died So
Yeah.
much so that there were people who said that they couldn't remember most of the movie the first time they watched it because they were so torn up about Optimus Prime dying that they had to watch the movie again later just to kind of remember what the movie was about because they were
Yeah.
so torn up over this one character.
Yeah, so Transformers the movie, it hits at peak Transformerness. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the Hasbro designers were involved at that point for toys.
Mhm.
And there was a noticeable difference in the way that the toys looked and how they were designed. I mean,
Yes.
Ultra Magnus, obviously, he reeked of G1 because he was,
Because he was
you
from
know,
G1.
powered convoy. Um, so they thought that, and I mean, it's unfortunate because the season 3 cast is not bad characters.
Mm-mm.
They're really good characters, but I think that kids just got stripped of everything in that movie, and a lot of them started to lose interest. And season 3 plays out, and they're like, oh shit, we got to bring Optimus Prime back at least. We got to apologize, but we don't get
Yeah.
him till the end of season 3. So by that time, we had hit this peak, and instead of being able to maintain this peak, we started seeing it's not a sharp drop, but it's a steady decline
is.
down. And by the time you hit about 1990, I think is when the last of like the MicroMasters and the Spark Bots and all that stupid gimmick shit was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It died a little sooner than G.I. Joe
It did.
because G.I. Joe held course. And so what was kind of cool about G.I. Joe is that they didn't have to kill people to not have them back around.
Right.
So G.I. Joe, the movie comes and it introduces all these new characters, but in the background, you get to still see Flint and Lady J and all these other characters. And G.I. Joe's out kind of like right in season 2. So you still had this like big 48 episode spread of a
Mhm.
lot of these characters that you saw in the movie. So and Sergeant Slaughter and Serpentor and all that. So G.I. Joe really stayed a little bit longer. And if Transformers hadn't have hit that huge stumbling block with the movie, I feel
Yeah.
it probably could have lived a little just as long in the toy shelves. So
Well, it started to make a little bit of a comeback when it started doing Generation 2 Transformers, right? When we started to get older model reissues, but in different colors and with a little bit different accessories, and a slightly more 90s take on the Transformers than
so
how they were originally released.
I don't remember. I think that the last Transformers left the shelf in about 90. And I want to say Generation 2 was about 1992 or 93. And yeah, you're right. All it was reissues of the original toys. And there were some upgrades like sound packs, and they had just goofy as hell paint schemes
They
too.
did.
Uh,
Which some have really taken on a life of their own and have become favorite versions of those characters for a lot of collectors.
I don't know, man. Blue Grimlock is not my favorite Grimlock.
No, but I do think that an upgrade to the Megatron character, making him a tank versus having him a gun, because they were worried about children guns at the time. Making him a tank was a good move for that character even. So
yeah, the gun thing, even for when Megatron came out, that was a little bit of a stretch for a kid's toy.
Yeah.
To look like that gun, but hey, we got it, and it was cool anyways.
Absolutely.
But Generation
but
2,
we did get some pretty good iterations of some of those characters. And from a toy collector's standpoint, some of the Generation 2 characters in versions are a little more highly sought after than some of the G1 characters or some G1 versions of them.
Yeah, it was kind of neat seeing Sideswipe go black and red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know what what they did for support though, for TV support? What did they do? They went back to Generation 1, like season 1 and season 2. They pulled episodes and put some fancy CGI up on the borders of it. But they did not go back to season 3. So they tried to course correct and put this product out there. And you know what? How long did that live? Like 2 years or something?
Yeah, pretty good for a comeback. I mean,
yeah, for a toy to even go a year on the shelves is pretty good, but to go 2 years, you got the G1 reissues, and then they started making new molds.
Yeah.
They started doing laser rods and the water squirting stuff and the ones with the billows that you hit and it shot the foam missile.
Yep.
And they actually made some really, really good toys in there, like Laser Rod Optimus Prime.
Yeah.
If his colors were a little better, more Optimus identifiable, it probably would have been more popular at the time. But I have several.
Yep.
So they switch gears and then they go back, but it's not. I mean, we're all aging out of it.
Well,
So
right.
our younger kids supposed to see these cartoons from 10 years ago and re-engage it the same way that they did, the same way that we did when we were kids.
Well, and when Transformers did kind of go away as far as being on the TV, it still went very strong over in Japan, and Japan got many cartoon series that we never saw in America.
Yeah, they got progressively more anime-ish, but I almost would have really liked to see the Headmasters come over and just be redubbed.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know why they haven't done that now. You know,
I mean, you can get it, and if you get it, God help me, get it subtitled. Please, please, please.
Well, no,
don't
I mean,
watch.
it would be nice if they went back and took those old episodes and actually did do a dub and gave us voice actors giving us lines so we could watch the Headmasters.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to watch Optimus Prime die again, but oh well. I mean,
Well,
we've
that's
seen
his
it so
thing. He
much
dies
now.
and comes back, right? That's his thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it stayed very popular in Japan. They weren't ready to go over there, but they
No,
were a
and
little
if you can get
behind
your
us
hands
too.
on some of the toys that were only ever released in Japan, that's another big collector's market there for those things as well.
Yeah, like in my opinion, just my opinion, like I'm okay with Rodimus Prime.
Mhm.
He's not Optimus like by any stretch, but I would have like shit a brick if the next one to pick up the Matrix after Optimus was Star Saber.
Mm.
That design is so incredibly cool. I mean, you
Yeah.
cannot fight with that design. The whole like small guy into a bigger suit thing, like powered up robot, Ultra Magnus style, and then
Mhm.
he can combine with his buddy, Victory Leo.
Yep.
So you wouldn't have to call him Star Saber. You come up with some other Prime name, but that would have been a super cool design.
Oh,
moving
it would have
forward.
been a blue and red version of that. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, and even if he had that whole same thing where he was unsure and he's young and he's untested as a leader, that would have been a really cool thing for us to see. I don't think that it still wouldn't have flown, with
Right.
Optimus Prime going away. But so you have
But
Transformers
it did.
Generation
But my
2.
point was that it stayed alive in some iteration, in some generation. It kept going.
Yeah. And then what was it, about 96 or 97? We got Beast Wars.
Which was a CGI animated series.
100% not my cup of tea. But what did Beast Wars do right? Characters.
Yep.
Characters. And it engaged you and it made you care. And I think that Beaks for Hands is stupid. And a robot that turns into a rat is dumb. But they were very respectful of the Generation 1 continuity. They didn't come in and say, this is Optimus Prime.
Mm-hmm.
This is his like way down the line successor, cast back into the past, Earth's past, and a lunatic who takes on Megatron's name. So it got you to care again, because the characters were very distinct. Black Arachnia with her voice sounded like a spider. And then you had Silverbolt, that you remember him.
I do remember, yeah.
Yeah, Rat Trap. Like he looked like a rat.
Yeah.
And
Well, but what I
Rhinox.
do remember about that series was they did actually care about the G1 characters, like you said, so much so that they even had Optimus Prime come in for an episode as a recording, I think, or as a hologram recording or something like that was brought forward so that Optimus Primal could see Optimus Prime and engage in a discussion with him.
Yeah. So it had all of these like little love notes throughout the series, and Unicron and Starscream. And then you actually had like the end of season 2 going into season 3 where they found themselves on the original arc.
Mm.
That I don't know if you've ever seen those episodes,
I
but
have not seen the end of those, so no, I did not.
oh, dude, you got to look up the end of season 2, the beginning of season 3. That's when we get Megatron goes trans metal dragon.
Mhm.
And then you get the whole reason that Optimus Primal becomes Optimal Optimus is because he has to carry the original Prime Spark, and it transforms his crappy monkey shell into like this badass robot that it actually can do stuff. So
Oh,
uh, it's very respectful. Like I said, I don't care about like spiders and monkeys and rats and stuff, but they went and said thank you. We know you're there watching to the original fans, but they presented something that new kids could get engaged with. And for
right.
3 seasons, you had that toy line going super strong.
Mhm. Yep. And I know later on down in later generations, which we'll probably get to in a second, but I do know that they took in the Siege Earthrise Kingdom new storyline, they actually took the G1 continuity and the Beast Wars continuity into account when they told these new stories, which I thought was a really cool idea, actually, to kind of make sure that the Transformers has entered into this multiverse concept that a lot of the stories now have entered into, where they take older versions of characters and stories and bring them in and keep them in line, or try to keep them going at the same time as newer stories and new characters,
Yeah.
and giving them this multiverse feel that says, hey, this may not be exactly, but that doesn't mean this one's dead and gone. It still exists, but it exists over here.
Yeah. So Beast Wars, like 3 good years, lots of toys on the shelf. And then something else happens, Beast Machines.
Yeah.
And they went to Tron with that. You know what I mean? And I don't mean Cybertron. I mean like it was very dark.
Mhm.
The designs were these really weird, like organic designs. They in their robot modes, they were crazy and odd looking, even more so than having beaks for hands. That was not a very popular line of toys, Beast Machines. There was like 1 or 2 characters. It was the Vehicons that people wanted because they turned into like jets and tanks and they turned into robots.
Okay.
But the main heroes kind of languished on the shelves. I remember buying an Optimus Primal and thinking, why did I just do this? I was at Toys R Us and I bought it and I'm like, why did I do that? So that closed the book really quick. I think
Mhm.
that line of toys turned a lot of kids off. They just weren't into the story. And that was part of the Fox Saturday morning lineup, right? Just like Beast Wars, it was a thing you could see. So
So
that was a
after that,
cliff.
what happened with Transformers after that?
Well, we went like about a year, and then all of a sudden there was news of this series called Robots in Disguise, which was a reimagining of the Transformers back on Earth,
Mhm.
where the Autobots were now, or the Cybertrons were now common vehicles like fire trucks and police cars and SUVs and sports cars. The bad guys are the ones that had wacky robot like dragons and
Mhm.
dinosaurs and stuff like that. So we get car robots in Japan, and in the trade magazines we get our first look at Fire Convoy, which is a badass fire truck. And when you transform him to okay, I'm going to stop for just a quick second because that's what became what we get here in America.
Okay.
In Japan, they get Beast Wars 2 and Beast Wars Neo, which is they're animated like anime cartoons. Same thing. One episode is Beast Wars Neo is Big Convoy. He's a mastodon that
Oh.
turns into like an Optimus Prime character. We get Beast Wars 2, which is Lio Convoy, which is the Optimus Prime that we should have had completely for Beast Wars.
The white lion one, right?
Yeah, so those 2 series are like pick up in Japan and they do really, really well, and they're not CGI. And Optimus Primal actually makes an appearance in Beast Wars 2 with Lio Convoy. So
Okay.
they have like this cool crossover, but nobody here gets to see it. A few of the toys make it imported. Hasbro imports them, like does this mail order thing where you can, call in with your credit card and they send you the toys. That's how I got a Lio convoy originally.
Okay.
But for America, we have Beast Machines. It dies, and then probably with about a year and a half or so later, Car Robots from Japan gets turned into Robots in Disguise for the American audience. And we see for the first time Optimus Prime that turns into a big rolling vehicle. And he's a super awesome fire truck, and he's got like the blue Optimus Prime head and the cool like yellow eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And he can combine with his trailer with the rest of the fire truck to become a big super robot. And then they're fighting all the bad guys are all the weird looking shit like monkeys and rats and stuff.
Okay.
So that series did give us a Bruticus reissue.
Okay.
As they were different characters, and it gave us a reissue of Laser Rod Optimus Prime as Scourge or Black Convoy.
Oh, okay. Really?
Which was like the alternate universe Optimus Prime that had come in and like teamed up with Megatron, the evil Prime. So that was the gigantic big step relaunch. Transformers is back. It's an all new series on Fox Kids, and it's 60 episodes or whatever. And because of that, I mean, that's such a success that we get the two concurrent series after that, which is Transformers Armada.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's three. It's Armada, it's Energon, and it's Transformers Cybertron. And that's like a collaborative CGI. One of them's anime, and then the other two, I think, are CGI. And those toys sell very, very well. And they start doing all these G1 homages, like redecos.
Mm-hmm.
And we start getting Optimus Prime that becomes a truck again. And then Optimus Prime, who's fat as hell.
Oh,
looks like a sumo wrestler. Wah, wah, wah. But then we get Optimus Prime as a fire truck again, but he's like red, silver, and blue like the original Optimus,
mm-hmm.
and has a really cool like combined mode with the fire truck. So they completely reignite kids' passions for that, and Transformers has not stopped since then.
It's kind of been going strong, right? Because then we went into kind of the new modern type of Transformers that kind of stick in a lot of people's minds these days. So we have what we had Combiner Wars, right? We had
Combiner Wars is post movie.
Okay.
So you had this trilogy that comes out, and we're doing really good. The first movie comes out, and we, at the time, it was like, obviously it's the best of all of them, the 2007 movie, but that's not setting the bar very high.
No.
But with that explosive movie success that it had, that everything, I mean, it just opens the floodgates for all of these classics, universe, generations. And we're now getting, because of the movie success, we get movie toys, but now we get other toys that we really want.
Yeah.
So thank you for making money, and keep making those dipshit movies. I hope the new one's better, but
as long as we get what we want as collectors out of it, it's all good.
And it has been Transformers Palooza for the last like 4 years. It is just unbelievable. And they're selling them to us, and we're giving them to our kids. We're all hoping that the new movie is better than Bumblebee, which was light years better than any of the Michael Bay movies.
Yep, I agree. That opening of Bumblebee alone was remarkable.
Yeah, and what went wrong? So we're talking peaks and valleys, right?
Right.
What went wrong with Transformers?
Well, the movie was a departure from the characters that we'd already known and loved. They took our G1 characters, redesigned them to the point where we couldn't recognize them, and then changed their personalities.
Exactly. And
so
there was no character moments in those movies. It was just Michael Bay taking his toys and smacking them together out in the sandbox.
Yeah.
So the one thing,
and the biggest criminal act that Michael Bay did, and it's not revolving around Optimus Prime. It's revolving around Bumblebee himself. He took the best aspect of that character, which was very relatable to a lot of kids at our time, being a small bot, not a very powerful bot, but he was really intelligent, and he can get into some things that the other big bots couldn't do, and he was always relied upon to kind of help fix the situation when the bigger bots couldn't do it. And
Yeah,
and
he was the heart of the group.
yeah, and then when Michael Bay made him this warrior, whatever it was that he became in the movies, that was not the Bumblebee that we grew up with. That was not the Bumblebee that we liked even. So I it's hard for me to even include those movies into the Transformers family because they're just so different.
Yeah, I mean they sell toys, and some people do remember the movies, but
Mhm.
you do not remember the characters in the movies. You remember things that happened in the movies, but you don't remember the characters.
Yeah.
And the whole reason, I mean, Beast Wars saves Transformers because it has characters, and it has all of these great like character driven moments. And we go from there. And in the animes, they were enough, that robot to vehicle, and there was enough character in there somehow that it got kids re-engaged with it. So
But
you know,
then you have Michael Bay come in and just kind of throw all that stuff out the window.
yeah, because he just thinks it's all about smashing things together and explosions and flash, when really what we're begging to see and what we want to engage with are characters.
Yep.
So you know, this is, even though the movies have been really bad, the worst one made like what, $800 million or something.
Well, and it did what we wanted it to do. It kept it alive. So
Yeah.
that way the toy line, which is ultimately what the Transformers are, is a toy line, kept it alive, kept it strong, and they got what they wanted from the Michael Bay toys. And then the G1 and the other Transformer fans like you and I were kept happy with the things that we got because of it.
Yeah, and because of the money that it made, it allowed budgets to create full-on new molds, new lines, and we are just consuming this at an astronomical rate.
Yep.
Because what are they doing? They're giving us what we love and what we want.
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to really speak on the animated series that came out on Netflix because I don't think any of them really got it right. I thought it was a lot of bad dubbing and lazy ass storytelling, but I mean, they were kind of trying to give us something, but
What they
it
did
was
get right
lacking.
were the toys, though.
Yeah, I mean, it was still lacking a lot of the character moments that made the original so good. But you know, we got the new movie coming out, and there is another animated project for theaters that they're working on.
I hope it's animated. I hope it's not just all crappy computer animated.
Well, and you know, it will be, but there's a new cartoon. There's a new
Real
cartoon that's
cartoon?
coming too, to Nickelodeon, and I forget what it's called. I don't know what the
Earthspark.
subhead. What is it?
Earthspark.
Earthspark. Yeah, I don't like, the animation looks goofy to me, but you know, whatever. That's fine. If it gets kids engaged, that's fine. Rescue Bots, characters, very childish, but it had characters, so that's
characters.
kids are into it. I glazed over Transformers Animated,
Mhm.
which went right back to giving us exactly what we wanted to have out of Transformers, and that series lasted 3 years on the toy shelves. So there is this cycle of giving people what they want and things lasting that
Yes.
follows Transformers, just like Ninja Turtles and just like G.I. Joe. And if Transformers hadn't stepped in it with the movie, you know, I might consider it on par with about where G.I. Joe is at, but G.I. Joe's faltered a little bit and Transformers has picked back up. So, you know, maybe in the long run, it's about a wash between the two.
It is, but ultimately, it's done what it needs to do in order to engage new fans, whether us old fans like the new stuff that's coming out or not. It's doing what it's supposed to do, and it's changing with the fan base that is joining with it, and it may not be like the best of stuff that we want to see, but at least it's keeping the brands alive, which is why we're talking about it today, right? Which is why it's not something that has disappeared into the annals of history. We're still actively, lively engaged with these franchises. You know, 45 going on 50-year-old kids.
Yeah,
We're still in love with these things.
None of these are niche fandoms. None of these are sectors. And you know what? Mask was another terrific one that probably should have lived longer, but we're not talking about Mask today.
Nope.
You know, every time you could take 140 somethings and ask them what their favorite cartoons were, and Transformers and GI Joe, Ninja Turtles will all be at the top of their list. Those are the ones you'll hear first before you, and then somebody might think that they're cool and say, I like Star Blazers, whatever. That thing, it was a great show. It ran on PBS at like 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah. But we all know, we all watched Transformers, we all watched GI Joe, we all watched Masters of the Universe, we all watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We know that. We all did that. And that's why they're so popular, and that's why they're still alive today.
Yeah. And they're
going to change. They're going to change again, Steve. Going forward, they're going to become something different.
If they're smart, though, they'll change and stay the same at the same time.
Well, and it is possible. We know it's possible.
It is. Yep. That's why you got several versions of Transformers cartoons that are living the life that they lived on there, because they changed enough, but they knew what made it there, didn't forget where it came from. So
exactly.
You know, I don't think we're going to stop seeing Transformers. I hope we see more Joe. Obviously, I don't think we'll stop seeing Turtles or Power Rangers or any of that. So God bless them. Keep making movies and new versions so I can buy more toys.
Yep. You're still going to make at least, somebody happy with either the shows, the toys, or whatever else comes out. So there's still going to be clearly a market for these things, and we're not ready to let them die. We don't want them to go. So, and I think our kids are going to enjoy them for many years to come. And that, I think, is probably the best thing about it, that it's multi-generational. Even with as much changes as it has, it still lives on through everybody.
Yeah, most definitely. And get those kids out there playing with toys, for goodness sake.
Put a toy in their hand and just let them have an imagination. Don't be scared of that.
Cut the screen time. Give them a robot that turns into a truck.
That's right. You'll be surprised what they come up with. All right, we have literally seconds left, so please, give us a comment, give us a like and subscribe. Come visit us on Facebook. Come see both of our Instagram pages. We'll put that stuff probably in the comments. Maybe we won't. Who knows? You'll just have to look for us. But either way, thank you for joining us tonight, and we will see you again on the next one.
See you in the toy aisle.